I knew the road was closed before I took it. That's the detail I can't get rid of, no matter how many years pass. The sign was there, half buried in snow, tilted at an angle like it had been hit before and never fixed. Road closed during winter conditions. I remember reading it clearly. I remember thinking about it. And then I remember deciding it didn't apply to me. It was already dark when I reached that turnoff. The main highway was still open, still busy, but it wrapped far south before looping back north toward my town. Taking it would have added nearly an hour to the drive. I'd been on the road since early morning. I was tired, annoyed, and convinced that the warning was meant for heavier storms than the one I was driving through. Snow was falling, but lightly. The kind that looks worse in the headlights than it actually is. The road ahead looked clean enough, just a thin layer of white dusting the asphalt. I told myself the sign was probably old, forgotten there from some storm years ago. So I turned. The moment my tires left the highway, everything changed. The noise disappeared first. On the highway, there's always sound. Engines, wind, the distant rush of other vehicles. On that road, it felt like someone had closed a door behind me. The crunch of snow under my tires sounded too loud inside my car, like it didn't belong there. The road narrowed quickly, trees pressing in on both sides. Their branches were heavy with snow, bending inward until they nearly touched over the pavement. My headlights caught flashes of white and black as shadows shifted with the wind. It felt less like driving through a forest and more like being swallowed by it. For the first few minutes, I felt justified. The road was passable, plowed. Even I could see tire tracks ahead of me, faint but real, which meant someone else had been through recently. That eased something in my chest. I wasn't the only one who thought this road was fine. My phone lost service almost immediately. I noticed when the music cut out mid-song, replaced by silence. I glanced at the screen. No signal. No data. I didn't panic. I wasn't planning to call anyone. Still, I plugged it into the charger, more out of habit than necessity, and set it face down on the console. Snow began falling harder about 10 minutes in. Not suddenly, but steadily, like the storm had been waiting for me to commit before it showed its real weight. Flakes grew larger, thicker, drifting sideways now as the wind picked up. My headlights started to feel weaker, their beams swallowed after only a few car lengths. I slowed down without realizing it. The speedometer dipped lower, but I didn't correct it. Something about the road demanded caution. The edges were harder to see now, the snow blurring the boundary between pavement and shoulder. The tire tracks I'd been following were fading, filling in almost as quickly as my own appeared. That's when I realized I hadn't seen another car since I turned off the highway. Not behind me, not ahead. No headlights cutting through the snow. No taillights fading into the distance. Just me and the road and the steady hiss of snow against glass. I told myself it was normal. Most people wouldn't take this route in winter. That was the whole point of the sign, after all. The thought didn't comfort me the way it should have. The road dipped into a shallow valley, and the trees grew thicker there. Snow clung to every surface, muting sound even further. I felt like I was driving inside a tunnel made of cold and shadow. I wasn't supposed to be at the cabin that time of year. The owner made that very clear when he handed me the keys. He said it twice, actually, like repetition might make the warning stick. We shut it down after October, he told me. No power, no maintenance. If something goes wrong up there in winter, no one's coming to help you. I nodded and told him I understood. I even believed it in that moment. But I was between jobs, short on money, and desperate for quiet. The cabin sat deep in the mountains, far from Tune, and he was offering it cheap, as long as I didn't complain about the conditions. No internet, no phone signal, just a place to clear my head for a few days. I convinced myself that winter was the perfect time. The drive up was long but uneventful at first. Snow had already settled deep in the higher elevations, turning the landscape into something clean and untouched. The road narrowed as I climbed, switchbacks cutting through forest that grew thicker the higher I went. I passed a sign halfway up that read seasonal access. Only underneath it, smaller letters warned about closures due to weather. I kept going. By the time I reached the final stretch, daylight was already fading. The cabin road wasn't plowed. It was barely visible, just two ruts winding through snow that had fallen undisturbed for days. I followed them slowly, tires slipping now and then, heart jumping every time the car fishtailed slightly. The cabin appeared suddenly through the trees, dark and silent, a simple wooden structure, half buried in snowdrifts that had piled against its walls. It looked smaller than I remembered from the pictures, more exposed, like it didn't belong there without someone watching over it. I parked as close as I could get and stepped out into the cold. It hit me instantly, sharp and punishing, stealing my breath. Snow crunched loudly under my boots, the sound echoing off the trees. The quiet was overwhelming. No wind, no animals, just stillness. Inside, the cabin smelled old and unused, dust and cold wood. I set my bag down, lit a few lanterns, and tried to make the space feel livable. The windows were dark, reflecting my own movements back at me. I told myself the unease was just nerves. First night jitters. In an unfamiliar place, the temperature dropped fast after sunset. I layered up, wrapped myself in blankets, and sat near the small fireplace even though I wasn't planning to light it yet. The cold felt different up there. It wasn't just air temperature. It felt like it came from the ground, seeping up through the floorboards, settling into the walls. Sometime after midnight, I heard the sound. At first, I thought it was the wind picking up, a low, distant noise that seemed to move through the trees. But as I listened, it didn't behave like wind. It came and went, irregularly. Sometimes closer, sometimes farther away. A dragging sound, faint but deliberate. I stayed still, listening, telling myself it was an animal. Deer, maybe. Or branches shifting under snow. The rational explanations felt thin, but I clung to them anyway. The sound circled the cabin. Not fast, not aggressively, just slow movement, crunching softly through snow, stopping, then starting again. I held my breath, listening to it pass beneath the windows, then fade into the darkness on the other side. When it stopped, the silence felt worse. I waited a long time before moving again. When I finally stood, my legs felt stiff, like they didn't fully trust the floor beneath them. I approached one of the windows carefully and wiped a small patch of frost away with my sleeve. Outside, the snow reflected faint starlight, bright enough to reveal the clearing around the cabin. I scanned the tree line slowly, searching for movement. That's when I saw the footprints. They led from the trees, straight to the side of the cabin. Deep impressions pressed into the snow, close together, like whoever made them hadn't been in a hurry. They stopped just beneath the window I was standing at. There were no tracks leading away. I backed up from the glass immediately, heart racing now. I told myself someone could have walked up earlier, before I arrived. That explanation didn't hold. The snow had been untouched when I got there. I remembered noticing that, remembered feeling strangely comforted by it. I checked the other windows. More footprints, circling the cabin, pressed close to the walls, as if whoever made them had been inspecting it. I didn't sleep after that. I sat with my back against the wall, lantern turned low, listening for any sound. Hours passed. Nothing else happened. No footsteps, no movement. Just the slow creak of wood adjusting to cold. At first light, I packed up. I didn't try to rationalize it anymore. I didn't tell myself I was overreacting. I knew, deep down, that staying another night would be a mistake I wouldn't be able to undo. Outside, the footprints were still there. Sharper now in the morning light. Bare footprints, no boots, no shoes, just skin pressed into frozen snow. My car struggled to start, engine protesting the cold, but eventually it caught. I drove down the mountain without stopping, white-knuckled the entire way, barely aware of the scenery I'd admired the day before. When I returned the keys, the owner asked if everything was okay. I hesitated, then shook my head and told him the place wasn't for me. He looked at me for a long moment, and then nodded. "That's why we close it in winter," he said. "Some places don't like being empty." I stopped because I didn't want to be the kind of person who didn't. That's the honest truth. I saw him standing there on the side of the road, and my first instinct was to keep driving. It was late, snowing hard, and the road was barely visible beyond my headlights. Everything about the situation felt wrong, but the longer I thought about it, the worse the idea of leaving him felt. He was standing beside a stalled car, hazard lights blinking weakly through the snow. No jacket, no hat, just a thin hoodie pulled tight around his head, shoulders hunched against the cold. He looked small out there, swallowed by the storm, vulnerable. I pulled over about 20 feet ahead of him and rolled my window down. The cold rushed in immediately, sharp enough to make my eyes water. "You okay?" I asked. He looked up slowly, like he hadn't noticed my car until that moment. His face was pale, lips tinged blue, eyes wide and unfocused. He nodded once and shook his head. "Car won't start," he said. His voice sounded wrong. Flat, not slurred, but distant, like it had to travel a long way to reach me. I asked if he had anyone he could call. He said his phone was dead. I asked where he was headed. He hesitated before answering, eyes drifting toward the trees lining the road. "Not far," he said. That was the first moment I should have left. I offered him a ride to the nearest town. It was 20 minutes back, the way I'd come. He didn't respond right away. Just stood there, snow collecting on his shoulders, staring past me into the dark. Finally, he nodded. I told him to grab whatever he needed from the car. He didn't. He just walked around to the passenger side and opened the door. When it got him, the smell of cold came with him, like metal and damp earth. He didn't say thank you. He didn't say anything at all. I pulled back onto the road and drove. For the first few minutes, the only sound was the wind and the steady sweep of the wipers. I tried making small talk, asking where he'd been coming from, how long he'd been out there. He answered vaguely, one-word responses. His eyes never stopped moving, tracking the snow outside like he was counting something. That's when I noticed his feet. No shoes, no socks, just bare skin, red and raw. Pressed against the floor mat, snow melt pooled beneath them, soaking into the carpet. I asked him what happened to his shoes. It looked down like he was surprised to see his feet there. Then he shrugged. "They got wet," he said. That answer didn't make sense, and he didn't seem bothered by that. The road grew worse the farther we went. Snow fell harder, visibility shrinking until the world beyond my headlights felt imaginary. Premeta slowed down, gripping the wheel tighter, aware now of how isolated we were. My phone had no signal. The radio cut in and out between static and nothing. I realized then that I didn't actually know where we were. I'd taken this route plenty of times, but winter had erased the landmarks. Trees blurred together. The road markers were buried. Everything looked the same. I asked him again where he was going. He turned toward me slowly. His eyes lingered on my face longer than necessary before shifting back to the windshield. "You're going the wrong way," he said. My stomach tightened. I told him this was the way to town. He shook his head, frowning slightly, like I'd said something confusing. "No," he said. "You should turn around." I asked why. He didn't answer. The silence stretched uncomfortably. Snow hissed against the car, filling the gaps between my thoughts. I told myself he was confused. Hypothermia can do that. People say strange things when they're cold, but when I checked the rearview mirror, I felt something drop in my chest. The road behind us was gone. Not literally vanished, but completely unrecognizable. Snow had filled in our tracks already, smoothing everything into an unbroken white surface. If I turned around now, there would be no clear indication of where I'd come from. I asked him where his car was again. He didn't respond. I glanced over at him. He was staring at the trees now, eyes wide, lips parted slightly like he was listening for something I couldn't hear. Tennis Smiladit was subtle, just a small upward pull at the corners of his mouth, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was no warmth in it, no relief. "You shouldn't have stopped," he said quietly. I felt a cold rush through my body that had nothing to do with the weather. I told him we were almost back to town, that there would be people. Warmth, help. He shook his head again, slowly. "They don't like it when people leave," he said. I didn't ask who they were. The car started to struggle then. The engine sputtered, hesitated, like it was choking on the cold. Warning lights flickered on the dashboard. I eased off the gas instinctively, heart pounding now. He reached out and placed his hand on the dashboard. "Don't," he said. I slapped his hand away without thinking and hit the brakes. The car slid. For a terrifying second, we drifted sideways, tires screaming uselessly against ice. Then we lurched to a stop, angled slightly toward the trees. I turned to him, ready to yell, but the passenger seat was empty. The door was closed. Snow pressed up against the window where he had been sitting moments earlier. The floor mat was wet, the imprint of bare feet still visible in the slush. I sat there shaking, breath coming fast, staring at the empty seat. I got out of the car, panic overriding caution. Snow stung my face immediately. I spun in place, scanning the road, the trees, calling out. There were footprints, bare footprints, leading away from my car, crossing the road and disappearing into the forest. They were already filling in, edges softening, under falling snow. I didn't follow them. I got back in the car, slammed the door, and tried the ignition. The engine protested, then caught, sputtering weakly but running. I didn't question it. I didn't wait. I drove. I don't remember much about the rest of that drive. Just white and darkness and the sound of my own breathing. Somehow, the road returned. Somehow, I found the highway. I reported what happened the next day. The police said no stalled vehicle had been reported on that stretch of road. No missing persons. No signs of anyone walking barefoot in winter conditions. They suggested I might have imagined it. I know what I saw, and every winter, when I drive at night, I don't stop for anyone anymore. Not because I don't care, but because some people aren't stranded. Some people are exactly where they're supposed to be. We weren't supposed to be on the lake. That was clear from the start. The ranger at the station told us as much when we checked in. He didn't raise his voice or threaten us with fines. He just looked tired, like someone who'd already had this conversation too many times. The ice isn't stable yet, he said. People think cold means safe. It doesn't. Not here? We nodded, thanked him, promised we'd stay on the marked trails. Then we drove past the signs and did it anyway. There were 4 of us. Old friends, the kind of group that still believed experience counted for more than warnings. We'd been ice fishing for years. We knew how to read weather, how to test thickness, at least. We thought we did. The lake was beautiful in a way that felt untouched. Snow lay smooth and unbroken across the surface, reflecting the pale winter sky. No tracks, no shelters, no other vehicles. Just white stretching in every direction, framed by dark forest at the edges. That should have been the first sign. We parked near the tree line and unloaded our gear. The air was brutally cold, sharp enough to burn your lungs if you breathed too deeply. The ice groaned faintly beneath our boots as we stepped out onto it. Low sounds that echoed under the surface. Normal, we told ourselves. Ice always makes noise. We spread out slowly, drilling holes, setting up lines. Conversation was light at first. Jokes, complaints about the cold, the kind of easy talk that comes from familiarity. But as time passed, the sound of our voices felt wrong. Too loud, like we were disturbing something that didn't want to be noticed. I remember realizing how quiet the forest was. No wind through the trees, no birds, no distant engines. Just the occasional creak of ice shifting beneath us. The sky darkened faster than expected, clouds rolling in thick and low, flattening the light until everything looked the same shade of gray. That's when one of us noticed the footprints. They were far out, closer to the center of the lake. A line of impressions pressed into the snow, leading away from shore. We all saw them at the same time. No one spoke for a moment. They were human. That much was obvious. Even at a distance, the spacing was wrong for animals. Too deliberate. Too straight. Someone joked that another group must have been out there earlier. That explanation didn't sit right. The ranger had said no one should be on the lake, and if someone had been, their tracks would have been partially filled by now. These were sharp. Recent curiosity won out over caution. It always does. We walked toward them together, keeping our distance from each other like we Deventalk. The ice groaned louder as we moved. Deeper sounds now, vibrations that traveled up through our legs. I felt a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with the cold. Up close, the footprints were worse. Bare feet. Toes clearly defined. Arches pressed into the snow, no signs of slipping or hesitation. Whoever made them had walked calmly, confidently, straight across the lake. They didn't come from shore. That detail settled over us slowly, like the cold sinking in once you stop moving. The tracks didn't start at the edge. They just appeared, as if someone had stepped up from beneath the snow itself. We had to get in quietly, but urgently. About leaving, about taking photos, about how strange it was, how dangerous it felt to be standing there when daylight was already fading. The decision to go back came too late. The sound was subtle at first. A sharp crack, distant and hollow. Then another, closer. The ice beneath us shifted, a ripple traveling outward like something moving far below the surface. We ran, not blindly. Not panicked, but fast enough to feel the danger finally catch up to us. The ice protested with every step, groaning and popping in uneven patterns. Snow flew up around our boots, blurring our vision. Then someone went through. It happened behind me. A sudden absence of sound, followed by a scream cut short. I turned just in time to see one of my friends disappear into black water, the hole snapping shut around him like a mouth. We froze. That instinct almost killed the rest of us. The ice continued to fracture, cracks, spider webbing outward. We moved again, slower now, spreading our weight, trying to remember everything we'd been taught. My heart hammered so hard it felt like it might break my ribs. We made it back to shore. 3 of us. We called for help, voices shaking, fingers numb as we fumbled with phones that barely worked in the cold. Rescue crews arrived faster than I expected, lights flashing against the snow, shouts breaking the silence. They searched the lake until well after dark. They never found him. The official explanation was simple. Cold shock, strong currents under the ice, a body carried away beneath the surface. Tragic, but not mysterious. What they didn't explain were the footprints. The rescue team saw them too. They stood at the edge of the ice, staring out at the marks leading toward the center of the lake. Someone asked where they came from. No one answered. By morning, fresh snow had fallen, smoothing the lake into a blank white sheet. No tracks, no holes, no evidence that anyone had ever been there, except us. We don't talk about that day anymore. Not really. When winter comes and the lakes start to freeze, we find reasons to stay inside. To fish another season, to let the cold pass. I drive by that lake sometimes. I never stop. Because I know now that some places don't warn you twice. And if you step where you shouldn't in winter, it doesn't always try to stop you. Sometimes it just waits until you're far enough out that there's no easy way back.